Bienvenidos, mis amigos, mis amigas. Soy Tomás, your host of Mateína, your podcast that is all about Yerba Mate. Welcome. I'm happy that you're here. And we have some exciting topics today. We're going to switch things up a little bit, though. We're not going to start with the Yerba of the Week review, but don't worry, it will come in the second part of the show. However, in the first part, we're going to talk about some news. Some news that recently happened in the mate world, from the rapid growth of Yerba in Europe. And trust me, I'm gonna present you numbers that will blow your mind. And then the second topic that we have, Ozempic. We've talked about it in a previous episode. However, we're still gonna take a look at it because I found some data that is very interesting when you compare it to what you might find on social media. And then story number 3, Paraguay. They're doing their own little thing with geographical indication. What that means, and a lot more, including the Yerba review, you will hear. So stick around, and without any further ado, we're going to start Mateína today. Thanks that you're here. This podcast is powered by your Yerba Mate store, somosmateina.com. So if you're lacking Yerba, if you're lacking a gourd, bombichas, any equipment, accessories, you name it, somosmateina.com. We ship worldwide. I would love to see you on our store soon. Let's dive into the 3 topics that I picked that recently happened. And that shows that mate is evolving from a regional tradition into a global phenomenon. And that brings us to the rapid growth of Yerba Mate in Europe, because according to a recent market forecast, the European Yerba market is expected to grow dramatically over the next decade, rising from $712 million, that was last year in 2025, to nearly, and now listen to this, $1.2 billion by 2035. That's not even 10 years from now. So it's almost doubling. That's the expectation. Big market. And that kind of growth is remarkable for a drink that, until I would almost say recently, was almost unknown to most Europeans and even Americans. Historically, as you probably know, mate consumption was concentrated in South America, particularly in Argentina, Uruguay, Paraguay, and southern Brazil. But over the past decades, European consumers have started discovering this beautiful drink as an alternative to both coffee and, I just have to say, those nasty sugary energy drinks. So guys, if you really, really want to have an energy kick, get yourself a Yerba Mate. And I'm not talking about the cans or the bottles that you find in your grocery stores. Get yourself a real mate. And one of the key drivers, and this hurts me a little bit, because we're going to come back to those cans and bottles. But one of those key drivers for the growth is the increasing demand for what the beverage industry calls functional drinks. And we also talked about functional drinks in our previous episode. So if you have not listened to it yet, go back and listen to the previous episode. It's called Messy Yerba and Functional Drinks, because we were reviewing Mate Rojo, which has a special edition. But if you want to know more, go back. Previous episode from last week, Messy Yerba and Functional Drinks. And if you like our episodes, if you like our show, please subscribe, like, leave us a comment. It's important to grow the community of mate drinkers worldwide, because it's a beautiful beverage that has a lot of benefits, which we're going to discover now, because it is like a natural energy drink. It has antioxidants, it improves focus, it has theobromine, theophylline, which are associated with antioxidant activity. Lots of plant compounds. Beautiful, beautiful drink. It contains caffeine as well, so it gives you that little kick, but you don't have the jitters. You do not have the crashes that coffee gives you. And interestingly, Germany, so shout out to all my German listeners, has become the center of this European mate boom. The country is one of the largest organic food markets in the world. If you have not known this before, now you know. And many consumers there are actively searching for natural alternatives to highly processed products. And in Germany, in fact, Germany alone is expected to grow its mate market at more than 7% per year, which is significantly faster than the overall European market. So to all my German friends, somosmateina.com at the store, we ship to Germany within 3 business days. So if you need some yerba, go recharge your battery with some good yerba. But another reason mate is gaining traction in Europe is the rise of ready-to-drink versions. And now we're coming back to the cans and the bottles. Because instead of preparing mate in the traditional way with the gourd and the bombisha, that drink that brings people together, many Europeans are first encountering it in cans and bottles, some even flavored with fruits or sparkling water, which I guess makes the drink more familiar to newcomers. And yes, it is fascinating because a traditional beverage is changing, adapting, evolving. And with that, I think it also opens doors. However, it loses something. And I think it loses something very important. And that is the community aspect. You don't share it with people. And that is missing. But on the other hand, again, it opens doors for, well, the traditional drink maybe. But guys, let me know what you think. Leave a comment. Go on Somos Mateina on our Instagram and let us know what you think about the ready-to-drink versions of yerba mate. Does it open doors for the classic yerba, or is a deterrent, and does it taint the beautiful yerba market that appreciates a gourd, a bombisha, and the ritual? Let me know. Would love to hear your opinion on it. And with that, we're going to the second topic that I picked. Natural Ozempic is what some people call yerba mate. It's a claim that you see on TikTok, your Instagram feed, on YouTube, in some magazines maybe. But does it keep its promise? Is it the natural Ozempic? If you don't know what Ozempic is a drug that was initially released for diabetes. And recently the FDA has, to my knowledge, approved it as a weight loss drug. Ozempic is not the only weight loss drug. There is more on the market now, but I guess Ozempic is the one that is well known, and yerba is often compared to Ozempic. But again, does it have the same effects as the pill that comes from a laboratory? In 2025, scientists looked closely at the evidence, the comparison they did, if yerba mate actually stimulates GLP-1. That's the hormone targeted by those medications. And the results showed that while mate consumption did reduce levels of ghrelin, that is the hormone associated with hunger, it did not significantly increase GLP-1 in humans. So what does that tell us? It works, but at the same time it doesn't work as well as the pill. And this distinction is important because drugs like Ozempic work by strongly activating GLP-1 receptors throughout the body. The mechanism slows digestion, reduces appetite, and affects insulin regulations, hence the diabetes drug. And Yerba Mate simply doesn't operate in the same way. Its effects on metabolism are much smaller and more subtle. So it works, but not as strong as Ozempic. But it doesn't mean mate has no metabolic effect at all. Because it contains caffeine and other bioactive compounds, it can slightly increase metabolic rate and may help with fat oxidation during exercise, but not to the extent that GLP-1 drugs have. But what's the bigger lesson here? The bigger lesson is about how information spreads online. Social media often takes a small piece of real science and turns it into a dramatic claim that goes far beyond the evidence. As I said, a beautiful hook like, is Yerba Mate the new Ozempic? Or GLP-1 versus Yerba Mate or equals Yerba Mate? Yeah, it's social media. But for the mate industry, something beautiful happened. It opened up a door. Because we should not forget, it works, it just does not work as extensively as the drugs do, but it's natural. It was not made in a laboratory, it was not made by scientists. It's a natural product that you can take that still suppresses hunger to some degree. But you just have to be careful with the exaggerated health claims because they just can create confusion and unrealistic expectations. So you're not gonna just drink a few gallons of Yerba Mate and wake up the next morning lost 50 pounds. That's not gonna happen, right? But I think you know that anyway. It has health benefits. It helps you because it suppresses the hunger. It increases the metabolic rate in your body. It helps with fat oxidation during exercise. And that is what Yerba Mate does best. And it tastes good. And you don't need to go to a pharmacy. You just go to a store and get it. Very simple. Did you know that? What's your take on it? What do you think? Did you think that Yerba Mate is going to make you lose a lot of weight right away? Did you believe the hype? Let me know. But at the same time, it opens a door because Yerba Mate has been all over the media recently because of that claim. And that's beautiful because a lot of people, even in my circle of friends, they didn't know what Yerba Mate was. They knew that the brand names that you find in the grocery stores in cans that are full of sugar. Then when they see me drink my mate out of my gourd with my bombisha, they ask me what it is. And I told them it's Yerba Mate. And then they say, yeah, I've heard of that. And so I guess it opened the door. Yeah. From science to social media, we're moving on to international politics and cultural identity. Paraguay did something very interesting recently. They filed for an international protection of something called Yerba Mate Paraguaya. And they're seeking what is known as a geographical indication. That's two words that sound very fancy, but it's actually not. It's very simple. A geographical indication is a legal designation used to protect products that are closely tied to a specific place. For example, and if I give you those examples, you will know exactly what I'm talking about or what geographical indication means. Champagne. Where does champagne come from? From France. From what region? Champagne. It has to come from there. Only grapes that grow there are allowed to be called champagne. Well, the grapes that go into the bottle are allowed to be called champagne then. Otherwise, it's sparkling wine. Parmigiano Reggiano, Italy. Darjeeling tea, India. And now Paraguay is arguing that its version of yerba mate has unique characteristics tied to the country's environmental processing techniques and cultural traditions. Yeah, this is how it's spelled out in their claim. And if the application is approved, under international intellectual property rules, only mate produced in Paraguay would be allowed to use the label Yerba Mate Paraguaya in participating countries. And the argument from Paraguay centers around several distinctive factors. One is the type of plant used, which differs slightly from the varieties most commonly grown in Argentina. Don't get me wrong, it is still Ilex paraguayensis, same thing. Another one is the traditional processing method known as barbacoa, where the leaves are slowly smoked over wood fires. This process produces a distinctive flavor profile that some would say it contains aromatic compounds not found in industrially processed mate. But this proposal has also sparked a debate in the region. Clearly, Argentina, Brazil, they're not very happy about this because together they produce the majority of the world's yerba mate, and they have pushed back against the idea that mate should be divided into nationally protected categories. Because from their perspective, mate is a shared cultural heritage of the entire Rio de la Plata region, rather than something owned by just one country. And this debate highlights something fascinating about food and drink. Because products like coffee, wine, tea, they often become deeply connected to national identity and regional pride. But yerba mate is now entering the same conversation as it gains global recognition. And taken together, these three stories show how much the world of yerba mate is changing. Because a drink that was once mainly consumed in South America is now expanding. It packed its bag and traveled all over the world rapidly into international markets. And at the same time, it's becoming part of modern conversations about health, social media trends, functional beverages, and even global intellectual property law. And that's part of what makes mate so interesting right now. It's not just a beverage anymore. It's a cultural tradition, a growing global industry, and a topic of scientific research, all at the same time. So the next time you sit down with a gourd of mate, you're participating in something that is both ancient and rapidly evolving. And who knows, 10 years from now, the biggest mate market in the world might be in your country. Yeah, it might be in your country. And that reminds me that our show wouldn't be anything without all of you. So I'm very thankful that you've been supporting this show. It's the 14th episode already. We started last year. We have grown significantly, and I'm very proud and I'm very honored to have been here for 14 episodes with you, that you have been here with me for 14 episodes, that we are sharing a gourd, a sip of mate in the wider sense. And I'm very happy that mate is spreading throughout the world and that you're here. Thanks again for your support. It is much appreciated. But don't worry. This show is not over yet. We're moving on to Mr. or should I say Señor Don Leandro. Because Don Leandro is the Yerba of the Week review. And now it's time for this segment of the show. And I am very happy to be able to introduce you to Don Leandro, because there is a very interesting story behind it. It might not be the most internationally famous brand yet, but it is a very high quality yerba from the province of, you guessed it, Misiones, northeast Argentina, which essentially is the home of yerba mate. So if you've ever seen pictures of that region, of the landscape there, you'll notice the deep red soil, dense green forests, and a warm, humid climate. You cannot see it, but you can feel it. Maybe you've even been there. And those conditions, they create a perfect environment for growing the plant Ilex paraguayensis. That's the holy tree that the Guarani sort of discovered, I guess, and started making mate. And the company behind Don Leandro is family run. And this is why I love telling you this, because Don Leandro is a family run, rather smaller company that produces mate in Argentina. And its history is closely tied to immigration and agriculture in the early 20th century. The land where the yerba is grown has been cultivated by the same family for generations up until today. And over time, what started as a small farming operation gradually evolved into a full yerba mate company, where the family not only grows the plants but also processes and packages the final product. And what I always find very interesting about smaller or mid-sized mate producers like this one is that they often control the entire process themselves. And I think this is very important in terms of quality. And in the case of Don Leandro, the company manages everything from cultivation to drying, aging, milling, and packaging. And that level of control tends to produce a more consistent yerba, because the same people are responsible for every stage of the production. So let's look at the production a little bit. Once the leaves are harvested, they go through the traditional drying process. And that process stabilizes the plant material and stops fermentation. Now, after that comes the aging period, which is I would say almost the most important step in developing the final flavor of yerba. Freshly processed yerba is extremely strong and grassy, but once it's aged for several months, sometimes a year or even more, in our previous show we talked about the messy yerba that is aged for 24 months, so 2 years. The flavor mellows out, becomes smoother and more complex. And the Argentine yerbas like Don Leandro typically spend about a year aging before they are milled and packaged and shipped to your home. And that helps reduce the harsh bitterness and allows the herbal notes to develop. The entire process, beautiful. And now, let's talk about the cut, because that's important, because it's an Argentine yerba. And the cut tells you a lot about how the mate will behave in the gourd, whether it's some yerba that you can use for long sessions or whether it fades out quickly. But normally with Argentine yerbas, they are pretty good at containing their flavor and their taste over long rounds, and Don Leandro does that too. It uses what's considered a traditional Argentine style cut, because when you pour it in your mate, you'll see a mixture of medium-sized leaf, small stems, and a moderate amount of polvo, that's the powder. And the stems are actually an important part of the flavor balance, because they soften the intensity of the leaves and make the overall infusion a little bit smoother and easier to drink for longer sessions. But before brewing, I like to smell yerbas, because that gives you an idea of where the aroma will bring you. And the aroma tells you a lot about what's coming. And Don Leandro has a very clean, natural smell. My first impression is grassy. It's almost like dried meadow plants or hay. There is a soft herbal quality and a subtle woodiness in the background. Some batches even have a faint floral note that reminded me of dried wildflowers, I would say. And once the hot water hits the leaves, the aroma opens up. The grassy characters come out, warm, slightly toasted, and the herbal notes become more pronounced. And the first few pours usually deliver the strongest flavor, like in so many other yerbas. But with Don Leandro, the opening taste has a mild bitterness, but it's not aggressive, it's not overpowering. Instead, it leans towards a balanced herbal profile. The flavor is grassy, slightly woody, with the classic mate bitterness that sits comfortably on your tongue without dominating the entire experiences. So what does it taste like after a few refills? The bitterness softens, the flavor becomes smoother, and this is when some subtle sweetness can start to appear in the background. Maybe even earthy notes. It's not flashy, it's not extreme, it's not very complex, it's just steady and on point. And one thing I really appreciate about this brand is that it doesn't overwhelm the palate. Some yerbas, they just hit you. Intense smokiness or bitterness or anything else, which can be exciting but also tiring over time. And Don Leandro, this sits more in the balanced category, making it more of a mate you can drink for extended sessions. And speaking of sessions, longevity is a word that comes to my mind. A good yerba should hold its flavor through multiple refills, and Don Leandro performs pretty well in this area. The first few pours, tough, flavor settles, stable middle phase, the herbal character comes out. It stays consistent, however, and eventually the taste begins to fade, but it does so gradually rather than suddenly washing out. So in practical terms, that means you can get a long, relaxed mate session out of a single gourd before the flavor finally disappears. There is also a few interesting details about the company itself, and I had this conversation recently with someone online about more exotic, less known yerbas, and I thought Don Leandro is the perfect example for that. It's just a on-point yerba. It has interesting flavors that come out through your sips. It's good quality. Yeah, it's a really nice. I have to say it. It's a really nice yerba, and it's not well known like other brands. And although Don Leandro is not a massive producer, it still produces a significant amount of yerba each year. It's about a couple million kilograms. And that places it somewhere between a small artisanal producer and a huge national brand. And the company also produces other lines of yerba, including a premium brand called Camino Nuevo, which experiments with longer aging periods to develop deeper flavors. And what I really like about brands like this is that the yerba reflects the regional identity of Misiones. Yerba it's not just an agricultural product, it's a cultural symbol. I mean, look at Paraguay, they want to make it even more than a cultural symbol. The plantations, the red soil, and the forested landscape, they're all part of that story behind every package. So when you drink Don Leandro, you're testing something that comes from a particular place and tradition. And overall, I would describe the yerba as a classic Argentinian, balanced, well-developed yerba. And that's exactly the kind of yerba that often becomes my daily favorite. Yeah, Don Leandro from Misiones. What can I say? We have learned a lot about Don Leandro today. It's a a rather small brand, family owns, controls the entire production up until it's put in the packages and sent to you. We talked about the mate growth, especially in Germany. We talked about Ozempic and the truth to it versus what you see on social media. And we talked about the geographical indication that Paraguay seeks. Fascinating topics, but unfortunately we have come to the end of this show. But don't worry, we'll be back every week with a new episode. I already have some topics in mind for next week. A big trade show is coming up in Barcelona and in Vegas. So I guess we should pick up those topics and talk a little bit about it before the show starts next week, Thursday, I believe. Don't hold me accountable on that. I think it's next week, Thursday. So thanks again for having tuned in, for sticking around, listening to me telling you a little bit about the Yerba world, the Yerbas, the mate world in general. And I would really appreciate it if you give us a thumbs up. We are everywhere. We are on Somos Mateína, Instagram. We are on YouTube, also Somos Mateína. We've recently started the passion project, somosmateina.com, an online store. We ship worldwide. I believe we have really good prices. We have exotic yerbas. We have quality gourds, quality bombichas. They are all handmade in Argentina. And it is just my passion. And I want to share my passion with the world, with you. And if you have not spoken to someone about Yerba Mate, go out, do it, find your friend, tell them there is an alternative to coffee. They should try it. Yerba Mate is really delicious. So again, thanks folks for listening in. It was a pleasure. And I hope to see you soon. Subscribe, leave a comment. And if you ever want to be on the show with me, let me know. Send me a message on Instagram. Go on our store, somosmateina.com. Get yourself the gear that you need. Stack up on Yerba. And don't forget, el café es para mortales. El mate para leyendas. Soy Tomás, your host. Muchas gracias.